Завжди Україна буде, доки б'ється кохання у груди. Свята Україна буде. Морієнду у серце.
Тарас Компаніченко. І завтра будемо бачити це культура з Тарасом і Компаніченком. So one of the things that's most important, I think, about being here is you got to know the culture. And I have these really wonderful gifts that have been given to me from my friends and family. Look at this beautiful copy of Kobzar, the poems of Taras Shevchenko. And then I have, of course, a second copy, which is the first book I ever purchased here, Kobzar. Boritsya Poborte, Vam Bo Pomahai. Fight and you shall win, and God will be with you. Shaun will join us in a minute. And then tomorrow I will be featuring some video I filmed of the musician you were just listening to. Taras Kompanychenko is one of our great Kobzars. And I have 4 concerts, I think, I filmed with him. The first time I saw Taras was at Roman Ratushny's funeral in June 2022. Roman was a Euromaidan activist and soldier killed in the first year of the war. And I knew the first time I saw Taras Kompanychenko, he was something otherworldly and profound. And our birthdays are only like this close away from each other. And he is the voice of not only Kobzar, but he's also the voice as a soldier Kobzar. So before Shaun joined us, I was playing some Taras Kompanychenko, our wonderful Kobzar bandurist, and yeah, so that's how things are. How's everything over there in Dnipro, my brother? And welcome. Вітаю, bro. Як справи?
Привет. Добре. Good. England, 0 point. No. Yeah, good.
Oh, for the listeners, I didn't tell you the name of the song. So the song is called Завжди Україна буде. So Завжди means always, Ukraine, and bude will be. So always Ukraine will be. That's Taras Kompanychenko we were listening to at the beginning. And then, so tonight, my brother, we've had a very busy week. And this begins essentially our new joint venture on Fridays to do good reporting directly from Ukraine. And we made up a nice list of some things. So welcome. And how are you, brother?
Good. We're just literally, I mean, I can't explain how we get a week's news each day. I mean, it's just been right. an absolute crazy week. Even now, you've got Lindsey Graham at the Munich Security Conference who's offering tomahawks and wants to kick Russia's ass. Then in America, just get onto a helicopter. Trump saying, Zelensky's got to come good with a peace deal and Russia wants a deal. You can't write this left leg's doing one thing and the right leg's doing another.
Well, I learned some time ago with the Republicans who promise things to be very cautious.
Yeah.
And this includes,
especially when it comes to Graham.
Especially when it comes to Graham. But because of the fact that it's good to hear, I actually believe that Mike McCall and Don Bacon and others are really genuinely interested. Roger Wicker, they say things and then they back it up with votes. But it's what I call the potentiality of these guys. What is that? And we're going to address that tonight. But I'm looking at some notes that we were preparing this weekend, and let's go back to, because you said it's been such a dense week. It almost seems like a month ago. Lavrov and his Kremlin deflection.
That started the week off. I mean, literally, I was in a blitz in Dnipro getting smashed with drones. And then you wake up in the morning and then suddenly you've got, actually, it's America's fault. And, it's America's hard line of undermining their agreement in Alaska. And it comes across, it was the Sunday night attack on Odessa and Kharkiv.
Mm-hmm.
And then to wake up in the morning, they're using 11 ballistic missiles, 149 drones. And then you wake up in the morning to see that, he's blaming America really for this. It's
Right.
America's fault, which again is against their normal line in a way to go against the Trump. Is it fair to call him a regime now?
Yeah.
But the Trump government, the Trump administration. One thing I keep telling people in the outside world is that Ukrainians are so polite. They've categorized America now into 3 different sort of areas. You have that Biden lot, you have the Trump administration, and when everything actually goes all right and they're grateful, they call it America. It's
Right.
it's how they
This. How many times have we heard Ukrainians correct us? And I'm an American from Texas. Oh no, it's not all Americans. And I say, well, okay, yeah, you're right. They have to talk me off my my axe grinding. But I appreciate that that's often nuanced by Ukrainians around me who see that it's not America that's doing it. It's this particular metastasization of Trumpism.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about when we talk. You've got that, you understand America. And I don't see many people having a Brit and an American on explaining different views, especially ones in Ukraine. And we got such a good reception for the last pod we did. I think we sat down and just said we may well do it. If people are interested, we may do it for another week and a week after and see how how it goes. I think it's a great idea. We can talk on the ground like last Sunday and like the deflections that Lavrov was making and iron out these narratives for not necessarily people that follow the war as much as us.
Right.
We live it, breathe it, we're here every day, but there are plenty of people that are just looking at this saying, but there's a peace deal and a trilateral peace deal going on. Whereas we're pretty skeptical of that, and pretty much everyone in Ukraine's holding no real positive outcome of this, trilateral talks because, Russia's made it very clear from the very start they want Kiev. That hasn't changed on the 28th of December. This week, Putin Lavrov reiterated that. The one consistent thing about this war is Putin's, maximalist demands from the very word go. So, we are a bit skeptical of this. And for someone that's probably in America who doesn't really understand it, who sees words peace, trilateral peace talks, Dubai, with Trump saying, oh, it's all going to plan, it's all great and productive. No, it's not. We're getting bombed on Sunday. You've got, lies from the Kremlin, blaming America and Alaska for going against the deal. You've got this week alone, you've had, Oreshnik alarms kicking off here daily. I don't think they're fine. I think it was a practice run, I believe.
Well, even I sometimes like to show this live is that, it's never absent of activity, and I went to get my haircut and actually the real reason why I went there is not just a haircut. I had to get the trim. And the alarm went off. And it was that Oreshnik, possibility at the moment, the mid, as you called it, the mid distance strike ballistics. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's worrying because that means it's going on. And, for all intents and purposes, Russia have got essentially they can keep killing. There's no restrictions on them. And, it's comments like now where you get Trump on the White House lawn saying Zelensky needs to make a deal when you've got Russians firing in missiles and rockets and drones killing, hitting a hospital today in Sumy, a children's hospital in Sumy today, who's just, trying to pile on the pressure. And then you had the FT this week. I don't know whether that's on the list.
It's definitely to talk about, right?
Jumping the gun here, but the FT this week trying to push elections, which is in a headline saying, there's going to be elections by the 24th and a referendum on the anniversary of the war. And, Zelensky was quick out the starting blocks to poo-poo that as that's just not going to happen because, we haven't got any security guarantees. And many who don't follow this war are going, yeah, but, if you don't strike a peace deal, you're going to lose these security guarantees. What security guarantees?
Right. You're going to roll back to Budapest memorandum, are you?
Yeah. The reason we're not signing it is because we've been stiffed before, because they're wise to that. So, yeah, I mean, to the people that are not really following it, that's why we're here, isn't it, really, at the end of the day, is to try and give people a perspective on the ground in Ukraine and why we might appear negative when we're not. We're just skeptical, and we're probably in tune with what's happening a lot more than the mainstream media that choose to report what they want. They'd rather focus on a shitty fake headline in the FT that says there's going to be peace and elections and a referendum, to the wasting Zelensky's time where he has to come out and say, well, that's just not going to happen. I've said we were open to it, but we need security guarantees first. So, it is why we're here. But it's very disappointing. There's not been one bit of good news this week, other than today, where at the Munich Security Conference, Britain has offered to supply, air defense missiles, and Germany's signing military partnerships with Ukraine, which is great news. So,
well, one that did come up actually, that because you just got close to it, is the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, otherwise people call it Ramstein, came up with 38 billion. And I ran over that a little bit this morning, that it's a very important update, because the abandonment under the Department of War drunk captain, when we had Lloyd Austin, I talked to both the British and the Canadian and German military leadership that came here for a Kiev Security Forum led by Arseniy Yatsenyuk. And Rob Bauer was there. I got to fist bump Rob Bauer. That's pretty cool. And these guys were very serious. And one of the things that you can do at the Kiev Security Forum, and I hope the next one you'll be up here for that, because you'll really enjoy talking to these folks, is you could ask them, like, how do you feel about the current leadership, or how do you feel about how things were with Lloyd Austin? Oh no, it was so easy to work with him. He's a very good leader, and we work together. And even you get a sense of how some of that machination works. And I want to ask our viewers to, one, thank you for being here, everybody. But if you listen to something you just said a second ago about our in-country perspective, that when we heard that FT headline, we always know, wait a minute, hold on. We just, before we even get the rest of the behind paywall information, we're here well enough to go, I don't know who's yanking that collar again, but that's not a thing.
No, because I didn't even speak to you when we were pumping out the same stuff on social media. Then I look at Dennis. Then I look at other people in the country going, hold on a minute, that doesn't make any sense.
Raw bullshit. Hey, it's Christopher Miller's raw bullshit.
Let's break that headline down. So
yeah, go for it.
Let me get this right. We got security guarantees. We haven't even got security guarantees. So what actually are we losing? Mm-hmm. If we're going to have a referendum, pretty much I'm pretty solid in saying that if we do miraculously have a referendum on these guarantees that we haven't got, pretty much most of the country, including the military, say we're not, well, they'll give Trump a big F off, and they will just tell him to go ram himself, because they're not going to give up territory that essentially Russia can't take militarily, and is struggling for 11 years to do. So that's not going to happen. So I'm pretty confident of that. So already you're tearing apart this headline with the FT going, none of it makes any sense. Why would he do
the announcement on the worst day of the year? We didn't have Zelensky's statement when you and I were on the phone and posting about it. That Zelensky statement came 4 or 5 hours later, going, "You really think I'm going to go out? Nushoti, bro. What do you think I'm going to go out on February 24th, the worst day of our calendar, and say, we're going to have elections in a few months? No, not on that day.
It's just not going to happen." And you start to break it down. You go, "There's no way that's ever a thing." So you sit there. That's taken the main headlines for the FT. Yeah, the strike in the Dnipro that's hit hospitals, power infrastructure, 10,000 homes that are out now without power gets put to the back. Whether it's done on purpose or not, I don't give a shit. It's fake news. It's coming in. So, it's coming in from the West. I have to calm down all the time when I sit there. I have to get on my soapbox and I start going. So, I'll take a deep breath. Because we've got a long way to go yet. And this has been like this all week. So, you started out Monday with Lavrov going, I was asking a question in my article for LLB going, so Russia bombs Ukraine, then blames America. How does that work?
Right.
And then I started to piece together, which we're going to come on to in the end, because this is the juicy bit. I started to piece together the whole narrative shift. I was going back saying the last time we talked, there's a power shift here. I'm not saying Ukraine is going to march into Mariupol and set up defensive positions, because that's unrealistic. What I'm saying when I say power shift is that if you go back to the start of the war, Russia had air dominance. They were pushing in from the sea, the land. They were making good progress. They were coming in. When I was captured 7 weeks, I didn't even think there was a Ukraine for 2 or 3 weeks before somebody else was captured, and Cole told me, I went, no, we're fighting back. My hair's on my neck right now. I was like, yeah, in this prison trying to scream quiet.
So if you don't mind, I hate to keep you there, actually. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Marines in a bit, but I want to hear that said to our audience one more time, and at your own timing, that you had these Russians and the DPR, LPR guys yelling at you that it's all over. Yeah. Remind them about what that was at that particular window, about this particular aspect, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. Well, initially, we'd got the order to break out of Mariupol. I think we can go back to that point. And, we knew that we weren't going to get to the encirclement was 200 kilometers deep, and we were going to break back and try and get back to Zaporizhia as best we could to friendly lines. It didn't work out like that. So when I was captured about 2 hours outside of Mariupol trying to break out, that's when, you've got an idea over the last 7 weeks that everything was going at that speed. You got to think on the 24th of Feb, they came across the border. Within a week, they'd reached Mariupol. We spent 6 weeks defending Mariupol. They'd encircled it, come round, 200-kilometer encirclement. So you're thinking everything's going at speed. And then you're captured. And then suddenly you're put into this resistance sort of mode where then people want information from you and telling you, feeding you filtered information they want you to think is happening. They'll tell you your friends are dead or we're making advance. We just taken Zaporizhia, and they'll keep going all day with it. One of the guys sort of said, we've sold you to some Chechens for like $1 million. And already I was going, who's going to fucking buy me for $1 million? You know what I mean? That's a bit of a waste of money. So, I just sort of you knew what was crap and what was not, because they were just really bad at it. And then, one of the things was, over time, you start to think, well, if they're moving that speed, how am I going to get out? And when you're in a black site underground in a 1 meter, 3 meter cell, in an isolation cell, not able to talk to anybody, or you're being interrogated and pulled out, and all this stuff is just on at you 24/7 with loud music. There's no light. You can't turn the light off. The light's on 24 hours a day.
Right.
You've got no window. You're distant to over time. They're just feeding this stuff to you. And it does have an impact on you where you start to, in your time where you're by yourself, you start to, and that's the dangerous time, is you've got to keep your mind on the tracks, if you know what I mean, or on the game, because you know what you're there, you know what they're going to say, you know what they're going to do. So you can't take any truth in what they say one bit. However, sometimes you just sit there and think, how am I going to get out of this mess? If Ukraine's fallen and I'm fighting for Ukraine, how's Britain going to get me out of this crap? Because I'm technically Ukrainian. So for 2 weeks, when I eventually did get put into a cell with some other guys, you then start hashing out plans and what do you think's happening, because you've got nothing else to do. It's another worse thing if you don't keep the skids on that, because you can end up going all the way wrong with the wrong idea. And then there's some guys that were brought in. Another English guy was captured. He was not in the military. He was an NGO, Paul Urey.
Paul Urey, right.
Yeah, I mentioned him in the book because he gave us some really valuable information. It was about 2 weeks before we plucked up the courage to sort of talk to him, because you can't really have conversations without getting a beating in the prisons. And he's at the other side of a wall. So we talked through a ventilation shaft, like, you know, you can imagine seeing like The Great Escape or something. We were like, hey, you know. So yeah, and he just went,
Wow.
Who's that? I said, it's Shaun. He went, not Shaun Pinner. And I went, yeah. And he went,
wow.
Oh, I just seen you on the news. I'm really in this shit. And I was like, you are, dude.
Oh, wow.
Really are. He said, I said, what news do you know? And he went, he said, your family's really upset, but they're hoping to get you out. And he really did come with some nice information. I wasn't interested in that, to be honest. I was like, no, what do you know about a war? And he was like, no, Ukraine's fighting back. He said, no, there's guys coming across the border, thousands of them. You know, foreigners coming across. They just sunk the Moskva. And I went, you kidding? You know, and
how did that feel? How does that feel? Because I know all of us on the outside. I mean, I have 3 T-shirts that have, Isco Corbel Idinachui written on it. And how did that feel when you heard that they had basically taken out a major, ship, or major enough?
Well, the 2 weeks we got really low, thinking that, we're never going to be exchanged because there's no government to exchange us. So when he came in, we were elated for days, weeks probably. And there's a camera focusing in the cell 24/7, and you're not allowed to make a noise. But when he told us that, the guy I was in the cell with, Vlad, spoke a bit of English and he understood. And we did like Marcel Marceau silent cheering in the cell with our back to the camera going, trying to keep as quiet as we could, because we realized that, look, I got goosebumps, look.
Yeah.
We realized we were still in the fight, and we had a country that was fighting back. So this was really a critical time for, when your morale goes down, this brought us straight back up. And you're like that all the way through Captivity anyway. But it was ecstatic. Unfortunately, unfortunately, Paul Yuri never made it out of alive out of the prison.
Yeah,
you can read about that. But yeah, unfortunately, he left an indelible mark on my life forever as someone who came in and just sort of gave so much good information, and he was so chipper and don't worry, we'll get through this, and it was a bit awkward to get on with, but he was a really nice lad at heart generally. He picked us up when we were probably at a really low point. So, but yeah, I was ecstatic. So then we had some sort of hope. Hope came back, and if you lose hope, you've lost everything. So you've got to keep that. But yeah. So we sort of digressed a bit there, didn't we?
Well, we ran straight to segment 5 about the Mariupol and 501 Battalion, which we'll come back to.
Yeah. I mean, while we're on the topic, we've gone through.
We can be there. So I for the viewers, I had mentioned this in my conversation with Brian Krim that I had as a journalist. I have the Defender notebook, and this was for a mom, Tatiana Chuganova, you see on the front page. And she was telling me about like how the things were working, and this phone number, sorry. And these were the different families I was meeting in that first part of the full scale invasion. And actually, Shaun, here's your release date information handwritten into the journal. You and Aiden and the guys, and Andy in here. And the reason why this was in here is I was laying out, I wanted to see a little bit about who was being released and how this was, evolving, because it was, if people aren't paying attention, it's just guys are released. Okay. But from where? I mean, are they territorial? Are they in Azov? Are they in Marines? Are they border patrol, police officers, civilians? And since there was a belief that the authorities here, the coordination headquarters, had biases that, oh, well, they only release their guys, and I had to do the math on it, and I found, well, no, they seem to want to get everybody home. That part I was able to prove, but I had to see more about these releases, and it brought up a story I asked you about in our last conversation, and then we had a conversation offline about the 36 Marines, which you were in, by the way. I
I
always keep
was.
this holy with me.
Yeah.
But in particular, the 501 Battalion, how their two commanders handed them over. And so my specialty has been these guys in the 36 Marines and 501 Battalion. And almost exactly a year ago, my friend Maxim Shkutelnik said, "Well, it was very hard, and then but my commander betrayed me, and like
Mm.
I didn't know this part of the story very well. It was around, but I hadn't heard it percolate up much." And I asked him again later. I said, "Can you go over that with me?" And a few other researchers I knew this story, and it wasn't really overly broadcast in the Western media. So, would you mind telling the audience about that? Because I wrote on Netzik Media, there's a call for a retraction from Forbes to say
Yeah.
you said they all gave up and marched into captivity. And that
Mm.
means I got personal axe to grind with David Axe for writing those words because that impugns the integrity of guys I know who, like you said, had to work together behind in captivity to say, what's happening with my wife. And they too were being told it's all over. Ukraine doesn't exist anymore. Oh, your brother joined the MOD of Russia. And then the other brother was told the exact same thing. Your brother joined the MOD of Russia. Ukraine is over. So let's talk, if you don't mind, I want to at least give the overview to them about what happened with the 501 Battalion in particular, or however you
Uh,
want to frame that, however you want to
yeah,
hear
I'm
that.
gonna. Yeah, we were Illich Steelworks, which was, for those that
Hmm.
don't know, is north part of Mariupol, and we would look onto Azovstal in the south. So we were in the north part on the H20 highway,
Hmm.
which is for those that don't know, is the motorway that goes out of Mariupol straight to Donetsk.
Uh,
Essentially, what happened was we held for 6 weeks. Command and control was exceptionally good up until when February, the start of the invasion. I would say probably till the end of March, it started to strain and was really feeling the strain of what was happening. Because what had happened was the perimeter, the 501st moved out from the cordon around Illich to
mhm.
push the Russians basically back. They couldn't get into Illich Steel, they couldn't take it. But what happened was when they got into the stripwood, they literally took basically the brunt of the attack on the sort of the northwest and west side of Mariupol.
Right.
To the point where the battalion was whittled down to, I believe, about 150 people. And this is a battalion of 500, maybe 600 people. So
Hmm.
it would took a brunt of the attacks for quite a considerable amount of time. Nobody could rotate people around. I mean, the cordon was there to hold the steelworks. Eventually, I'd just been blown up by a train IED of all things,
Mm.
and coming out of hospital after sort of 12 hours getting treated for flash burns, I'd literally got picked up and they told me that the 501st had just disappeared. Well, the hospital I was in was right next door to their Stab, their HQ. So I was able to literally walk out of the hospital, go down some steps, and go into their HQ base the first chance I got out of the hospital. And when I went there, it was all gone. They'd left everything, all the ammo, food,
Hmm.
clothes, everything. They're just gone, disappeared and taken off thermals and everything. I couldn't believe it. This is like guys had just deserted and left and not even told anybody they were going. And I was there the night they left through the night. And in the morning, they weren't there to do radio checks. They'd gone, disappeared.
Mm.
So already that caused a problem because then the 500 had to surrender to the Russians without telling anybody. We didn't know. That left a massive gap in our coordinate Illich. And within the next few days, and within by the end of the week, they'd started to move through the gap, the Russians, and then started to take up positions we formerly held.
Hmm.
Then we had to sort of come into Illich a bit more and make the circle smaller. But by that point, by the sort of first week in April, it was done. They were it was like the end parts of Saving Private Ryan. They were driving
Mm.
in through streets, blowing holes in walls, sending troops through the holes. It was close quarter fighting within you know, 30 meters, 20 meters. They were the other side of walls. We can hear them talking Russian, and you know, I was with my guys. And then it will be drones flying in 10 feet above the ground, looking in through windows and doors, trying to find you. We moved further back into sewage works that were underground, so it gives us a chance to recover through the day and then go back out and cover the perimeter at night. But I mean, it was over by then. It was only borrowed time, and we knew that we wouldn't be able to hold the position for, you know, for too much longer. We run out of ammunition, running out of food and water. Weirdly, the story is I've got a passion for green tomatoes. You know, those pickled ones in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because I was so hungry when I went down into the 501st HQ. The only thing they had an abundance of were these green tomatoes. And I'd never really tasted them before, but I shoved all these green tomatoes down my throat because I was thinking, you know, I don't know when I'm going to eat this. I'm going to have all these pickled green tomatoes. And now it takes me straight back to the stab of 501st, which is, you know, takes me straight back to that time, that taste, you know, the Mariupol and everything else. That's going to be with me forever. It's like some sort of, I don't know, relative shock. I don't know.
Sure,
I just couldn't believe it. But yeah, as far as I know, the commanders are now working with the DPR. I've seen pictures of them, you know, just living life normally. And
in Berdiansk, right?
So we don't know how long they were talking to them for, and how much you know, how many people lost their lives because they turned. Did they sell out the 501st? What did they get for it? But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things we knew.
Well, I have families because of the specialty work I really focused on this particular topic of the captured defenders, and then some of the nuances that, and actually they're going to come into several parts of our story tonight, is that, one, there's some people who said, well, they caused my guys to get captured, and there's some shitting on them from other families who had been told certain things that were without contradiction yet. The wives I knew and mothers I knew in the 501 circle, both 36 Marines and 501 circle around the 501, said nothing for the first couple years about how they had to work twice as hard to get acknowledged, to get aid as defender families. And it wasn't until well after that when Maxime told me, you know, what happened. I went to some of the other wives in the 501, and like this last week we had Ruslan Kurtmalayev released, and I've known his wife since my first rally, and then I got told, oh yeah, it was difficult, and my first reaction that I didn't say what I felt was, why didn't you tell me? But they didn't think to tell. Like it's between them and the coordination headquarters of them and the government. But it was really twice as hard in those families to get the support because their guys were impugned at the integrity level. And now they've come home in the last year. More of the 501 have come home. I know 7 of them personally and physically hung out with them. And then about another 10 that I communicate on a regular basis and Instagram. And I won't choke up because I've restored my ability to not choke up on this, but it's really an incredible feeling to wake up on Instagram the other day and have Ruslan, who just came home a week ago, liking the photos I did of him and his wife, like the posters they made of him. And he's like, you know, like him and then thank you. And it's like, bro, like, of course, man. And how are you? And we're here for you. And there's a whole world for you. And I know that they don't know that, this whole reliving the life, but having that first contact with the guys and saying, you know, I love you. I was there for these guys, you know, and you guys were there. A lot of our viewers are longtime supporters of this, and they had to relearn their lives, but then they get to learn what their wives went through, their moms went through while they were in captivity. It's a lot. Yeah.
Like I said, it wasn't the guys. It's the head shed. Some of the top tier officers just defected. The guys fought valiantly.
Sold them out.
Sold them out.
Some guys actually openly rebelled. I know the guys I've talked to, there were a couple that said we were ready to blow his fucking brains out.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean,
there was some hard rebellion that was happening. Yeah.
There was some other guys that are trying to negotiate their way out. They knew that we were surrounded. One of the hardest things to do when you're in encirclement is to keep people positive and keep fighting. And, it is exceptionally hard. My team and my platoon did give up. We were certainly trying to get back to friendly lines. It never entered our minds to turn, or I'm a Brit. Why am I, as if I'm going to do, what I'm going to do? I can't even pass as a Ukrainian. I'm like, I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian. I speak with a London accent still, it's like, it's a bit, I was always going to go, even if on my own I was going to go. I wasn't going to stay and surrender. It just, I just not going to happen. So, it's a difficult one. Especially with families the other side, and I'm not making any justifications for someone that's treacherous and
right.
Who does defect. However, this goes to show the incestuous relationship of Russia and Ukraine over the years. 60% of Russia's connected to Ukraine in some way. So, they know what's going on. This is the bit where Ukrainians don't call this a Putin vanity war. Russia knows what's going on, and you're going, yeah, they do, because there's a lot of people connected to sorry, my computer's doing some random stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of people connected to Ukraine in some sort of way, So it's a bizarre set of circumstances. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, certainly the POWs are interviewed because they want leverage on people that might be in Ukraine that can go and torch vehicles or blow up recruitment offices, and certainly they will use that to blackmail families and say, if you don't do this, we're going to kill your son. We've got him, and that goes on, So even to the point where Andy, who I was captured with, they sent ransom notes to his family, including his kids, because they were on his phone. He got captured with his phone. They sent threatening messages. They said I think it was 20,000 euros to this bank card, sent the bank card and sent it to all his contact list on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, we're going to kill him. That's what Russians do.
And Russia had done this. One of my great friends who's a special forces medic, when I met him just before the full-scale invasion started, and he says, they are savages. The things they do, you should see. Like, for instance, one time, they killed one of our guys. It's nothing we can do about it. And then they take the phone and they call his daughter and said, "Here's what your daddy did at work today." Like, what a fucking dick. Like a savage monster orc dick. Like
it
traumatizing the child.
It's systemic. So
yeah, it's systemic. The standard operating procedure of orcs.
Yeah, it's torture. It's electrocution in the ears, electrocutions on your fingers. It's cattle prods. It's I was stabbed in the leg, and then you saw the pictures. I won't go into it. I was stabbed. It was like 60 kilo by the time I got to trial. I wasn't eating anything. So, I was talking to Dylan, or he was having a cell talk, and it was like swap to you then, mate. Just trying to incel bragging. Oh, I was waterboarding. Really? Tell me about what happened. Well, I was putting this contraption, and my head was trapped in this bucket, and every time I didn't give them the answer they wanted, the water rose until the point I was like, my head was under this water. And then I spoke to Paul Uri. I said, "What happened to you then?" He said, "They hung me on a hook for 12 hours. I couldn't feel my flipping legs."
Wow.
And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then this Azov guy came in and said, "Nothing, mate." He said, they put ball clips on a Tapik and then electrocuted him on his testicles with 2 paper ball clips attached to his testicles.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, it's like, and that gallows humor kicks in. You just start laughing when because you're all in the same stuff, and it's like, no, you win, mate. It's like, I don't no, that didn't happen to me, so I'm quite, it could always be worse at the end of the day, even though I got stabbed in the leg, and I got a nice 3-inch knife wound scar in my leg. So it can be worse, and you've got to have that attitude in captivity, that it could be worse. And
it's not just what they do to you; it's what they do to the other guys. You could be only as tough as and to the women, you can only be as tough as what they're going to do to your buddy in the other room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you are going to break. There's nothing you can really tell them. You're not going to. As we had touched on before, torture is not used how people generally perceive torture to be used. It's not like James Bond where they, tell us where your friends are, tell me where the microfilm is, or I'm going to electrocute you. They're going to electrocute you anyway.
Right.
Whether you tell them or not. If their line of questioning is, have you seen Elvis?
Right.
You're going to go, yeah, he's my dad.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to do it. You're going to say everything. It's just not like that. What torture is really good at doing is getting you to admit to places you've never been and things you haven't done.
Forced confession, then hold you accountable for your words.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they'll go, the prosecutors in the DPR have amazing record, 100% record of guilty, of success, because they're already electrocuting you and you already had enough of it. They're starving you. You're being pushed out for propaganda. By the end of it, you're just going, yeah, I'm a Nazi mercenary terrorist. It's not going to stop the electrocution,
Yeah.
And that's what
I have the Stepan Bandera box set. Gold letter edition.
Yeah.
Right. Patrick brought up, we can go ahead and move through this. Patrick brought up the attempted exploitation of the defender families. And before we get to the Starlink side of it, I'll say that the coordination headquarters, for those who don't know, and the easiest way to know is follow the work I've been doing for the entire time. And of course, Shaun knows as well. But I've gone to this organization under a GUR many times for briefings that the families go on a regular basis by different units and different organizational affiliations they build as families. And they're warned on a regular basis from nearly the beginning. Be very careful about saying things because the enemy is always looking for an exploitation. And of course, the families get a little cynical because, like, I want to advocate for my guy. Why are you telling me not to say anything? But both were true. There was evidence all along the way for the last several years of the attempted exploitation of the family's vulnerabilities. Everything from, hire a lawyer and we'll go to Moscow and get your guy. Not happening. Nimozhna. Civilians, maybe. Civilians with children access, there are some small successes, but not under POW category. That did not happen. But this last week, it actually got really interested, which ties back to the Lavrov part. And that's like, what was the title of today's show to get us here?
Yeah, the Soviet playbook. Have you tried turning it off and on?
Right. 404 is the Kremlin on. The shutdown of Starlink, and let's walk from there into kind of what happened later.
Well, as I touched on earlier, the narrative's changed. It's gone from really bombastic, outlandish, from RT to general propaganda. It's always been about, we're making advances, we're going to take Kiev, we're making successes, and we're doing extremely well. Everything's, the most common one is, it's all going to plan, and the meme or the little clips, the montage of all the heads of Russia going, we'll be in there in 3 days, we'll be marching down Christiatic, blah, blah, blah. We've had this for two or 3 years, of we're making progress, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Now you're getting a different look, not just the way the messages, the viewers are watched and keep an eye on this now. You'll see a different way that they're projecting the media now. It's more preparing the Russians for consolidation, disappointment. You got to remember, Putin's promised and annexed. He promised Kiev and annexed more territory than he holds. Now he's trying to just barter Donbass that he's been trying to spend 11 years trying to take. Now they're at the realization that after nearly 1.3 million casualties, they're just not going to do it. The last 2 months have seen over 30,000 Russian casualties per month, which is more than they're recruiting for the first time. And they want to get 50,000 Russian casualties every month. Now you're starting to see Ukrainian narratives and propaganda coming through now. Both sides have propaganda, let's be honest.
Sure.
You're now starting to see a change in, which is what I refer to as the power shift, which changed quite a while back, which was, if you go back to the start of war, we were on a defensive footing. Russia had air superiority. I would say if you 100%, Russia had probably 90% swing at that time on the pendulum. They were coming in, they were making good progress. over time, that's gone back to probably 50-50 now, where it's a stalemate. It's not a stalemate. I keep telling people it's not. Anything can happen. Technological advance, someone breaks through, economic, Russia's economy could collapse, Ukraine's economy could collapse. So it's not stagnating. It's a different war now that's still unfolding. And at 4 years, it's taken 4 years to get to a point where Russia is now at a point where it's now struggling financially, economically, and to the point now, I would say, where a large part of the Russian mill bloggers are seeing this and challenging it. Even like last week, a guy in parliament was challenging this, saying, we're not going to win. And that's escalated even further now in the fact that, Putin is now pushing a propaganda agenda that's now on damage limitation, trying to push false villages that they're taking, Pokrovsk, Kupiansk. The whole propaganda message is changing. It's now fighting fires. It's now selling lies. Propaganda only works where there's an element of truth in what you're saying,
right?
An alternative reality to something that's happening around. What you've got now is just downright lies that even the Russians can see. Right. And you've got Kalashnikov who's saying this. You've got Igor Girkin is now posting from prison. This is just ridiculous. But this is not new. Remember, you had Prigozhin doing the same thing. He got to 200 kilometers from Moscow, saying Gerasimov. And then you have to look at the age of the actual, the Russian cabinet. Gerasimov, what, 70?
Right.
75. Lavrov, Putin's what, 70, 72 or something? You've got Lavrov, 75. They're all old age pensioners. Now you look at Fedorov in his, 30s. Zelensky, 48. Budanov, 39. This is the old versus the new. So what you've got basically is a cabinet, a Russian, I could nearly called it the Politburo.
Right.
You've got a Soviet doctrine, Russian leadership that's now doing what it does. It's now panicking, and the only thing it thinks it can do is sort of reduce the size of the audience. And what does it do? It's now stopping WhatsApp, Telegram. Telegram is one of Russia's biggest apps.
Yeah.
You use it in the military.
Yeah.
Ukraine, you saw yourself, everybody in Ukraine used Telegram. It was never Signal or WhatsApp. It was Telegram.
Yeah.
Everybody used Telegram.
U vas je Telegram, tak? U vas je Telegram, tak?
No. So, this is massive. So what it's doing, and I've been saying for 6 months, they've been taking little bites and little bites. Now they've hit Google, WhatsApp, Twitter's already banned, Discord banned. All Western apps are now, you can probably get out with a VPN, but they're jammed and reduced.
That's right.
And then you had this week, just before that, Elon stopped Russia using Starlink.
So what did they have to do after that? Which brings us to a really important part of today's story.
Well, the irony, good sir, is that Russia is just like, slags off the West, calling us decadent, satanic, we're independent Russia. What we've realized this week is the whole Russia system works on Western tech. It's deeply embarrassing for Putin this week, deeply embarrassing for a Russian military that's been hollowed out by the very government that's running this invasion. It has no gear, no comms. And
you're the soldier. I'm just a journalist. What would I know? How important are comms to victory?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
You're the soldier. I'm a civilian. How important are comms to victory?
Well, you're sort of, a bit. You're not just a journalist. so, signals. I just listened to an interview today where a Russian mill blogger was just saying that, he was holding praise to the signalers because now their whole hopes rely upon them. Good luck with that.
Right.
Because they're trying to work workarounds. And you know more about what's going on with napalm and the you can probably talk about that better than me.
Yeah, if you may run to that part. So
yeah.
So I have had a long time admiration of Inform Napalm and the previously known as the Ukrainian Cyber Alliance. It's actually changed a little bit because of the components, but the 256 Cyber Battalion released yesterday a report showing that they were able to get Russians to give up. I love this part. I wrote a whole article about it. Today, the first thing I banged out this morning, I was working out last night, was Starlink trap how Ukraine turned Russia's satellite lifeline into a counterintelligence harvest. They got these guys to basically give over their phone numbers and information, thinking that they were reaching vulnerable families. And no, they weren't. They were reaching the 256 Cyber Alliance, who was basically saying, no, Dovmanice, dobre. Keep giving it to me.
yeah.
And then they were able to flip it, and it's great. It's what I love about not only I love Fedorov in this capacity. I've met him several times, and especially this last year, I saw him several times with Brave One developments, and you could see the thing I knew I saw several years ago. I'm an IT guy. That this is the way in which Ukraine can kick ass. It's low cost. Low cost response ability to a major big Goliath and of the Russians that are boorish and stuck in old ways. And this was just another example, like it's the digital version of Operation Spiderweb,
Yeah.
where the cunning and the craft and knowing the enemy better than Americans do, better than the Canadians do. No offense to everyone else, don't be offended. It's just a unique insight that the Ukrainians have to the Russian side that only Ukrainians can code switch so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the language is probably someone from America fighting someone from Yorkshire.
Right.
As a comparison, they both speak English, but tomatoes,
Right.
aluminum. It's that sort of with some different culture, a bit of different culture thrown in. But that's the layman's terms. I mean, that's pretty basic view. But so they do have that insight into Russian culture, and they've learned some tricks along the way. And you've got to remember, Ukraine was the R&D center for the Soviet Union. So it's where the brains were. It was where the development, industry.
Active measures was not. Active measures was not practiced only by the Russian side of the USSR. It was practiced by all the former satellite countries and the Ukrainians. And so, who knows that playbook? Ukrainians know that playbook.
Ukrainians, and then they picked up some new tricks from the American friends and the Brits. So, it's they've got. I certainly, when I was in captivity, the Russians were shit scared of the SBU. I could ring MI6 in the UK, but when I said I want to ring my wife, they went, no, you can't ring her in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why not? It's like you could see them going, no, they'll track our phones. It's some of the interviews we had were quite open, and quite an insight into sort of the spy world in that respect, because the FSB were running the show, and you could tell the difference. They had all the good gear, the nice watches, and they had the respect of the Donetsk version of the FSB, the MGB. So it was very much a lesson there. I mean, I pride myself that I got through captivity, and they didn't really know who I was, the training I'd had. I was just a poor guy that fell in love, which was a cover story they built. I fell in love and fought for my country because I was married to a Ukrainer. They didn't know my army background or they what I'd done. They found out I worked with Azov as an instructor for 2 years. There wasn't much I could do with that, but I came out with all my fingers and my digits, which is a success.
Yeah, God bless you.
So it's more than some. So, at the end of the day, I mean, it is where Russia is at the moment. They're struggling. They're not winning. Far from it. And Zelensky's right. They're not. We've been saying it for a good year now. Things have changed. There's been a power shift. There's a massive power shift. Whether we've got our problems, as you know, we have our problems, and we don't know if we have enough infantry, how much support we're going to have. But I bet you now all this is coming to light that Trump comes to the rescue again. It's just
Trump
happened to us.
has one aspect I hope will keep kicking in, which is, and some of the guys around him, they want to be on the winning team.
Yeah, he wants to be in the win. I mean, he's going to blow it with what he's doing now. I mean, business is business. At the end of the day, we do business with Germany after World War II. We do business with the Japs. Japs are supporting Ukraine. So, you know, business is business. Eventually, it does. But he's not doing any favors for America at the moment with Ukraine by constantly jumping on Zelensky while kids are dying today, you know, or hospitals hit, or a passenger train is hit, or, you know, how can you talk peace when there's no ceasefire? How can you tell Ukraine to work something out with Russia, who's constantly bombing them, and you don't know what security guarantees you've got? That's why what we do is really important, because people go away from watching us and go, did you know that? You need to watch this podcast because they're telling us this, and because we're here on the ground and we're seeing it. You know, we don't. If there are problems with Ukraine, I'm quite happy. I'm quite vocal about mobilization. I don't get arrested for it, or, you know.
I got stopped twice this week. It was very interesting. I went to meet with one of the heroes of Ukraine, and about helping Americans who have been fighting here and have injuries and other needs, and the fact that the VA in America doesn't take care of that when it comes to this. And then you and I mentioned that the similar thing happens to was it NHS is the system in Britain? Yeah. And so they too, like, it's the war over there. So we were having that meeting, and on the way back, I have a police officer stop and like, "Oh, may I see your documents, please?" Yeah, and that's not happened the entire time I've been here. So, or at least not like that. So I was like, "Yeah,
Twice
sure."
it's happened to me.
Yeah, so I pull out
years.
my ID and I pull out my press badge, and he's like, "Okay, have a good day." You know, it's like, "C'est dobre." Oh yeah. And it's just routine. And then the attack that happened night before last, I went to Dnieper River I wanted to see it frozen. I come from Texas where we can't see that easily. A frozen lake you can just walk out on. A significant historical lake, no less. And for obvious reasons, you know, someone being around the river, you know, especially we have the battle happens across the river all the time, you know, stop and go, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, я журналист, але я живу тут, недалеко там." And okay, and okay, have a good day, you know. And the attention is very high, you know, at a constant rate to make sure that infiltrators, collaborators, people up to no good are observed. And I think that's important for people abroad to understand, is that it is a serious situation always, always. And martial law is a serious thing. But you and I talked about, we feel different here. You know, by living here, we have a sense of what it is. And I know, for instance, when people say Tetseka on television, and you get these little clips of the mobilization guys and having a clash, and then the propagandists weaponize it. I've been there when it turned into absolutely fucking nothing. And I've been there when one time when it did turn into a little bit of something, not worth video, but it was some tension. The reason is the other guy was actually in the army, and he just happens to have a little time off, and he's in civies. So he's like, "Hey man, look, I'm in the fucking military." "Yeah, but we're doing that." "Yeah, but I'm in the fucking military, asshole." So glad, you know. And he gets tense, and if someone's like, "Ooh, I got a video clip," guess what? Within about 5 minutes, you would have not even noticed something happened once they had a little calmer talk, because what you get captured in video is not what gets reflected here. And the term for that in logical fallacies is called spotlight fallacy. Is to take one little thing there and blow up all of it around there. And you and I live here. Part of what we have to do for our audience abroad is to give context to those things that happen.
Okay, one of those things is really important, is what you just said. 7 years, I've been stopped twice by the military police. I've shown them my ID. One of them just joked and said, "Do you want a contract?" You know, it's like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But the concept of things, I do
Yeah,
travel.
talk. You know, like, okay, yeah, I want to fight. I want to help you out.
Overzealous people. I'm not going to ignore you until now. I've had friends that have been basically dragged to the recruitment office who were working for charities. It does happen. I'm not going to tell you, but certainly I live in one of the biggest cities, in the third biggest city in Ukraine, travel all around Ukraine, and I'm military fighting age, and I don't get really stopped very often at all. So that doesn't happen. Then you've got to weigh up who, like you said, are you stopping someone and are you dragging him out because he's AWOL or because he's tried to leave the country? Is it Border Patrol that's grabbed him trying to cross the border? You know, you don't know that when you're watching a video that this isn't someone who's, committed assault or trying to, gone AWOL from his battalion, which you would do the same thing in the UK. You would do the same thing you would take them back and then deal with it at the processing center. You know, at some point, you've got to remember 18 to 22-year-olds can leave the country freely.
That's right.
They're not held here. There's just a ban on men leaving the country because they're at war because Russia's invaded. You know, this is a fine age out. And they're now saying that if you do a year's contract, you can if you fulfill your year's contract with the military, you can defer it afterwards. But these policies can be changed. Russia, you get no choice. There's no police complaints commission. There's no, I'll just go to my ombudsman and challenge this. Right. I've interviewed them in the Russian POW camps in the west of Ukraine. You know, they just tell you, I don't get a chance, pal. I'm a farmer. If they tell me I've got to go, I've got to go. You know, otherwise I'm going to go to prison. And you've seen Russian prisons, haven't you? Yeah, I have. Yeah. So, your life expectancy is going to be 5 years. You'll be going to probably in Russia, if you don't go to get called up for the service, you'll probably end up going to prison, then going to a worse unit like a Storm's Air unit, and then having to, go to one of those units and start charging Ukrainian positions and all those drones. So, essentially, stealth mobilization's going on. That's a new one today. That's now Hamish Tibetan-Gordon's just wrote a great article about that and what we can expect now from the closure and the insular closure and the repression that's now going to go on in Russia to stop or spy on the negative comments that are already outlawed by Putin. So the reason he wants to go to those apps is, as the founder of Telegram just tweeted this week, is because they want control, they want transparency, and they want to see what you're watching. So, even he said that this week, and he's Russian.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And you said this on the phone the other day. You talked about how the whole thing will shift. It's really going to shift to full mobilization. And you said the panic kicks in.
There's three things I said would happen. One was about a year and a half ago. I was saying, technically, his economy can collapse and we could walk into the occupied territories without a shot being fired. I was getting laughed at. Even on Talk TV, they were like, yeah, that's never going to happen. You fast forward to now and everyone's going, well, that could happen.
Right.
It's because we see it. Right. We live it every day. We see what's going on. So it's happening. Another one is I was saying that there'll be a communications iron curtain, which we've talked about. It started with a lot with what was going on with the Western apps. And then it was Twitter was banned. And then eventually I think the foresight is it's going to go to complete communication shutdown with the occupied territories to stop, because the paranoia is setting in now in Russia.
Well, speaking of paranoia, one of the things I have on the list here, I said we're going to start doing a regular report on. And tonight I'm just going to introduce it as a way we do things, and I'll keep doing, because I have full segments. I have a 20,000 word article I finished today after the publishing 4 other ones. But I worked on this one for a long time. It's the partisan warfare. And back in October 2023, I wrote a series of articles, and I stopped on one. So the first one was the captured mayors, Holopristan story of Alexander Babich. And Holopristan is a small town on temporarily occupied side of Kherson. And Alexander Babich was set up by MP guy named Alexei Kovalev. And Alexei Kovalev basically had an arrangement where, I'm just looking into the town. I'm not working with the enemy. I just have to look out for the people. I'm bringing humanitarian aid. But he had like salt investments and stuff he was promised with the Russians. So we know that he was working with the Russians eventually. And someone took out him and his wife. And those were the Partisans. So I announced on Spaces after I had read the others out loud. We had like our audiobook form of those. And those stories are up on NatSig Media if you want to go check out those stories in sequence. So it was the captured mayors, the collaborators, and then the hidden story that I'd never finished for reasons that were OPSEC oriented was the rise of the Partisans, which was supposed to debut on November 5th, 2023, and I held that story back. And I held that story back because I said, I have so much more about this I want to learn. And I went to visit with several folks who knew current partisan warfare from 2014 on and had some insight of current 2022 forward partisan warfare. And one of the things that's very important for our listeners and viewers to know is that the FSB learned a lot of techniques from the first era that they applied differently through filtration once they exacted more control over these regions. And there were a lot less partisans to be able to fight, and a lot more oversight and control, and lessons learned on the Russian side. But many of our good listeners and viewers know about groups like Atesh and or Slamovka. And so I said, well, we're going to have to start having a regular partisan section in here, as often as possible when they are. And so this is it. And one of the things that ties into our whole theme of the night of the 404 era of the Kremlin, is that we often know what the Russians are not doing and successful at because of these operations that the partisans have. So the talking points for this particular week are that the growing partisan movement in there is a growing partisan movement in the Russian-controlled territory. There is awareness because of especially like in areas like Skodovsk, where they're trying to, the Russians are trying to train young people to fight for Russia. You have some who go, okay, sure, I will. And they're leading information over. And we're getting trickles of information. And if you watch the Atesh Telegram account, and you know people who can verify that with you here, there is a Resistance Network official organization here. And then there's the recent attack on a senior Russian officer. And if you remember, also this last week, I published the Dead Generals stack that I love. There are internal security gaps and intelligence gaps opening up throughout Crimea and Kherson and Zaporizhia. And there are, as you just said, cracks appearing behind the front lines. And this has started to reveal vulnerabilities in the Russian control. And the reason why it matters so much for the partisan warfare is that, for those of you who ever fought, you're a soldier, you fought in Syria, and guys that fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, they cannot sleep knowing that there's someone over there is like, go to sleep. Please go to sleep.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're going to be definitely paying attention to. And it really did percolate into this Starlink report that, some of what we know about how that all unfolded on the other side came from Atesh confirming collapse in command and control structure.
Well, I mean, there's so many indications.
There's the presentation of my end for the partisan.
No, you're dead right.
Take the ball.
You're dead right. All this is linked. Look at the general this week. Look at now that's linked possibly to FSB, colleagues that were involved in the shooting of the general. You've got you've got so many things opening up this week in Russia. Just the fact that the mill bloggers and the community in Russia is now challenging things like Copians and challenging Starlink and challenging Telegram. You got to remember everything that if you criticize the military or the operation in Russia, you're going to prison.
Right.
So this is a major thing when certain elements of Russia start saying, like Solovyov today was slagging off the economy. This is getting rippling. This is getting more and more. And this is why you're now seeing a raiding in of social media. This is why. It's nothing to do. It's certainly to do with security. If
they were confident, they wouldn't have to.
It's certainly to do with security. Can't argue with that one. Especially if you're Putin, you want to rein it all in. It is security to a degree, but it's not for the defense of the realm of the empire, the Russian Empire. That's security just to protect the cabinets in place who's bringing in some old Soviet measures, knee-jerk reaction, which is the only thing they can do. And you've got to go back to this winter program, this winter targeted. This is not new. This is a recycled program that didn't work the first winter, last winter, or the winter before that. So at the end of this, summer's coming in probably about 4 weeks. Spring will be here. Spring will be starting to turn up in Ukraine. It will get warmer. Today was 4 degrees.
Yeah, actually, Russia, just forget about everything was dripping around here.
Russia spent billions this winter on a failed plan that hasn't worked for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And and they'll do the same. They'll just do the same thing. And I think Russia is getting fed up with losing millions now of people to, and it started with Prigozhin. They papered over the cracks. They give it a run for its money. Now Putin has never been under so much pressure. This isn't the time to quit now. This is a time to keep pushing on, because you can see it visibly in the Russian chats, the Russian media. You can see people getting really upset. And the oligarchs are the guys that run the country. And now you can see with the false reporting of towns, the death flag runs, as we call them, of just trying to get another couple of 100 meters to say they've taken the town when they haven't really taken it. They haven't got fire control in it. They don't really hold it. And now they're losing. Reports say they've just lost 10 kilometers in sort of the northern sector because, Russia has said they've taken its ground. They haven't really. They're not. And Gerasimov is reporting he's still got Kupiansk in full. And we're watching it live time on the telly with Zelensky popping down there, going, nope, that's not happened.
Right.
That is massive red flags. Or if you live next to Russia, as long as you've been here, that is a massive red flag, because opening line, when I was in captivity, people knew in Russia when it was bullshit. They really did. And I used the Makivka at that time.
Right.
When I got to Makivka prison in about June, of 2022, there was no artillery fire and nothing happening. By the time September came round, Ukraine had got within 4 kilometers of the prison and were firing artillery rounds into the prison. And we thought we were going to get liberated because they got to within 4 kilometers and started using mortars. So the prisoners and the prison guards all knew what was happening. Yet, Russian media and Russian TV and radio would tell you everything's fine. We're making progress. We've just they're watching Ukraine come in
Right.
at that particular time. So they know, and they were getting disgruntled. I could hear them talking in the yard, complaining about, they're not telling us the truth. We're going to get hit again. We're going to get Ukrainian shells coming in. We're just going to die in a prison locked in a cell. So they were getting really itchy. And this happened before at that prison as well. I believe 12 guys actually escaped when a Ukrainian round hit the prison wall, and some prisoners got out. So this prison I was in had some pedigree. So, they're not daft Russians. They know the news is false to a degree. But you've got those Russians that are on the front lines in Belgrade and Makivka and, have moved into Mariupol and Donetsk and Donbass. And then you've got those in Moscow who just haven't got a clue. They don't care. It's a different world in Moscow and St. Petersburg, But that's all about to change. When full mobilization comes in, that's going to upset a lot of people. And a lot of people are going to be, I'm not saying that Russia's going to revolt, but it's going to upset a lot of people who are now going to be thinking they're being called up because the leadership's made an absolute dog's dinner of the SMO that was promised as a 3-day operation, and 4 years later, or even 11 years later after 2014, with help from China, North Korea, India, patchwork of foreign mercenaries, Iranian drones, still can't even take Donetsk Oblast. I mean, it's if you was in charge of that in the West, you would be out of a job 2 years ago.
That's right.
But this is Putin. He's a master at selling a disaster. Oh, did I just write?
Yeah. Well, one more thing about the partisans real quick is that the actions of a small group like Zlamovka, and I always compliment them on Instagram and write them messages of keep going, we need you to do this, is that they're different than Atesh in a capacity. They often put pro-Ukrainian stickers in different parts, basically saying, we're still here, we're still here, don't sleep tonight. And this is very old partisan activity, no less, as I've studied a lot about how the partisan warfare worked in Europe.
Look at Berdyansk. They can't go to Berdyansk on holiday.
Exactly.
Russian soldiers are dying from poisoning. I mean, it's everywhere.
Exactly.
There's different degrees of
don't settle
people
in.
think it's the occupied territories, but it doesn't mean to say it's rolling over. There's stuff going on.
Correct.
It's especially in Mariupol, if you know where to look. They're
Mhm.
quite busy around there, hitting the railway tracks and the substations. And you think all those targets that go in. How many generals have died in the Ukraine side? It's just not
Many. I have a
having
whole
the
list of the
same.
Russians I put up this week, the stacking of the Russians, and tomorrow I will put out the Partisan article. I like to really finish proofing and working on these, so I don't rush them out. But I invite our listeners to go check that out, so you can get a greater depth on what it has looked like and how it's also got a big historical significance. Tomorrow, when I do the culture show, a couple of the songs that are in the lineup are old partisan songs that are rifleman songs. So one of the ones everyone knows is "Oh yeah, Luzichevo Nakalina." So that is actually a partisan. These are partisan and resistance songs that are so important. But what Zlamovka is doing does matter, and ceasefire is one of the things that Volodymyr Zemshikov, when we were eating and talking about essentially what I needed to understand as a Westerner about partisan warfare, was he goes, ceasefire is what sucks the oxygen out from us. Ceasefire is not our friend in that, because that means every action we make, we get, basically SBU and others will say, hey, you got to lay it down. And yet for us, it's our lives. We have a different context. And that was very eye-opening because, I'm 56 and I remember a movie called Red Dawn. And Red Dawn
Yeah.
was all about this, like the Wolverines and,
Yeah.
making sure that no one could rest. And Sun Tzu very clearly said 2,500 years ago, trying to control occupied territory that is not yours is very, very difficult and a sign of a weak militarist.
Absolutely.
I think our Red Dawn, Wolverines, my friends are watching. So
I
our
was just
friends are
trying to
having,
read a question in, but I missed it. I'll
yeah.
have to come back.
I'm actually trying to catch some of these questions. I think we're covering pretty
I
well what they're
did.
asking,
Let's catch some of these
and
questions.
we've
Short
got some
question,
good
cursed
stuff in here.
operations, fill the Russians with fear for them. That's all. Thanks. Oh, okay.
Yeah, get that. I'm gonna get a drink real quick that I have sitting 5 feet from me. Hold on.
Let me just have a look while you're
Yeah, go
shooting
for it.
off.
Got it.
Fantastic interview. Great. We'll keep coming back, guys. As long as you keep wanting us to come back, we'll keep
Every Friday.
shooting the breeze every Friday. Definitely. Yeah, I think, Pete, the misconception
This is a Georgian, by the way. This is a Georgian cream soda. The Georgian brand cream soda.
He's doing his place advertisements now. Cut from the
awesome. These are addictive. These are
profit.
so beautiful. Anyway.
I've got a nice Ukrainian claret, which is
Budmohe.
It's Friday, Budmo.
So let's move into there's actually one bit that I put up. It's just a small bit. It's bad news for Russia, bad news for America, and bad news. Go fuck yourself, Hungary. The corruption index was released this last week, and I have been studying this now for a little over 2 years because I didn't want to hear just the word corruption. I wanted to know, what does it mean, how does it live here, and what is being done to fight it. And it took a while to get my head around it. But one of the key indicators was called the Transparency Corruption Index, and it's basically how big investment firms decide how to do business in different countries, all the way down to South Sudan at the bottom and Norway's at the top. And so when I first tried to get into understanding what this was, I went from the year 2000 to 2024. I think that's where the cutoff point was for me at that time. 2023 numbers of 2024, and I saw essentially this number, except for one period of time between 2010 and 2014 when it went down, which was Yanukovych era. And Russia did the same thing. It was going down, except for it went up briefly one period of time, which was in Yanukovych era, and then it kept going down. So I love to get these numbers out because I get to see what is the mobility of Ukraine through these numbers. And we had one digit drop last year when everything was upwardly mobile, except for last year it went down. But this year it went really well up, and it continues to have this upward incline towards accountability for the way in which the EU wants to work with Ukraine. But America continued to go down, like significantly down under Trump. And I had to juxtapose it against one of the shit-talking countries like Slovakia and Hungary. And guess what? They're going down. And Russia is always near the bottom, significantly no movement. And even they are going down. So the corruption, here was the numbers, the way I wrote it out, latest headlines, latest corruption index perceptions show only Ukraine in that category was consistently going up. It's improving its trajectory. It also increasingly went up after 2014. So if you were to say it's been going up since, my first measurement was 2020, the index existed before the year 2000, but I started at the year 2000. And once it got to 2014, it went up significant enough to show that Nabu and Sapu have their positive effect on the country. And again, U.S. is declining, Russia continues to decline, and this is the way in which companies and NGOs and governments decide to invest in Ukraine, which is why like the Pearl program to buy weapons or the Ukraine Defense Contact Group means so much, because if Ukraine was lost, these countries would not go do that.
No, it doesn't help when Putin's offering Trump 12 million in a cooperation package for a country that only has a 2 trillion, GDP. So it's you can see the narratives and the corruption that's in play here, because that's what is getting Trump's ear. Doesn't get past the 12 trillion, even though many people say nobody will ever see the money. Russia will be looking how to take that money and put it in its own pocket. It can't get 12 trillion. It just can't do it. So, it's just, this is where we're at with the war and the corruption. Unfortunately, Trump loves that. He loves that.
That's what they want, right? He speaks corruption, and the reason why I try to tell people that when you think of what Russia really wants by these election announcements, is that Yanukovych was their guy. He sold out the weapon system. He depleted the army down to useless level, which is why you had to have units like Azov and Right Sector go jump to the front and bring other civilians, because there was no army left to do that with. And that's what they want, is they want to drag. If you just look at the numbers, there's a hemisphere, like the transparency organization that does this is making it very clear that autocracy rising is about increasing corruption, and that the whole battle here is not just about bullets and ammunition and artillery and drones. It's about that model of corruption that permeates into Africa and into Latin America. And then when you have Trump doing the same thing, Russia's still winning, So we have to really impress upon Americans, especially who are dealing with Trump, and anyone else in these European countries, that it's the corruption you're fighting that's going to make the big difference. If you keep fighting the model of corruption that the Kremlin wants, you're going to help basically so many different problems all come together at once.
Absolutely. And you only have to look at who Trump sent to Russia, Witkoff and Kushner. No one from the State Department. No Rubio, nobody. It's all about the money. It's all about the dengue, brother. It's all about the dengue.
That's exactly it.
It is. It really is. And it's really hard to see. And many Americans, as you know, you being yourself one, are seeing this and fighting this now, which is great news. Hopefully for the midterm. So, another thing to look forward to tell the listeners to look forward to is the midterms, if they happen. Let's hope they do.
Yeah.
Because if Trump gets trounced, that means that's closed a lot of doors for Putin. Trump will lose at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong, he has Congress and the Senate. So, if he will lose
and the Supreme
both.
Court.
Yeah, if he gets trounced, he'll lose both. And I think the Epstein is now another one to watch for viewers, because that's all now linked to Russia. That's all, it's Russian girls. He's, Epstein's love for all things Russia. Putin's also, a Russian mentioned in the files. I mean, this thing's massive. It's all linked in, which has got a lot of people asking, does Putin have compromise on Trump? Was this whole thing a Russian plan? I mean, I think personally, I've never been a conspiracy theorist. One thing, I've been a soldier, so I'm not really political. I'm now an activist and I'm pretty political. And I've never been a conspiracy theorist. Now I'm like, Epstein. It's all maybe
Right.
some guys those nuts guys were right. There, there is this island with, where the rich go to play, and it's all coming out. So you're just sitting there. I hate to say, these are people's lives, So
Right.
I don't want to. But I am sitting there with popcorn, going, "Who are they going to pull out next?" Listen, we
Right.
had this in the UK with the I can't
Right.
remember the name of it now, with the investigation to Jimmy Savile, and I mean, heads are starting to roll in Europe now with the Epstein problems, and
Yeah,
still America's like
King
slamming
Charles is
this.
currently throwing his own brother under the bus, saying, "I'll cooperate with the law enforcement to help make this."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, their heads
And they were
starting to
so
roll.
quiet
It's
about it
going to
for so
come.
long, it drove all of us nuts. Like, really, can't you just at least throw Andrew under the bus? Andrew is like so, oh, how British, how the British royalty is treated. Like you can't even ding them. But
And
now
the Dow's under 50,000 now, so we can ask about the islands. We can do that now.
oh God,
Good old Pam Bondi.
Fan Bondi and the children. But I'll tell you, the S&P, he is the greatest president of all time, and the SP is just rolling
Look at the stock markets.
Yeah, look at the stock market. The other news, I updated my Tulsi Gabbard story about the whistleblower to say now we know that it related to Kushner after the Wall Street Journal, and having Kushner and Witkoff trying to do this shadow diplomacy, all unofficial and illegal, by the way. And go back, and I wrote about that too. Witkoff is not official, and if you don't believe that I know what I'm talking about, go back to the founders. They had 4 major scandals in the Federalist Paper years that were exactly this. When everyone had their own diplomat running around Europe playing games and corruption, no less. And that's why we have an appointments clause. So Witkoff, there is no magic emissary. We can honor it as such, and then he gets that magic power. But he has no magic power. He is unofficial. His operations are actually illegal, and they have no effect unless we give them lending of agreement. And it brings us to one of the things you had in here was about the U.S. support for Ukraine, real numbers, Don Bacon, and American backing.
Oh, I've forgotten about that. What were you talking about?
Claims and counterclaims
yeah.
about U.S. support level. We kind of touched a little bit about it. Actual
Yeah,
numbers,
we
political
kind of touched a
context,
bit about that.
while U.S. backing matters more than headlines suggest. So the fact that, like with the Pearl program and the Ukraine Defense Contract Group passing, Europe coming up with the money does bring back the side of Trump that we did see in the first Trump era, where the only time he showed up was like, "There's oil, yeah, in Ukraine." When he sees money signs and a chance to do something, he acts. And he did not give javelins. He approved an FMF sale of first a sniper system, 41.5 million on December 19th, 2017. And then it was like hours later after the Canadians announced that they would do javelins. Then he goes, okay, javelins. But it was purely money. They weren't thinking strategically. So I think that we have with the Pearl program and the amount of money, 38 billion approved of by the Ukraine Defense Contract Group, that we're going to see at least some bite in America to say, yeah, take the money and sell the weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking. I mean, we touched on it earlier again with Lindsey Graham at the Munich,
Right.
Gary Comfort saying he wants to give tomahawks and he wants to hit Russians in there. I mean, that's just Lindsey Graham garbage again, And at exactly the same time, Trump's on the lawn saying, Zelensky needs to make a deal. It's like everything that Graham's saying on the, how the killer sanctions go, Lindsey Graham.
Right.
We're still waiting for those. It's like that for me, when that came about, got the most skeptical of us going, well, maybe Trump has changed. Maybe if we get these killer sanctions come in, it was back on it. Trump's back on it again. And whenever Putin gets in trouble, Trump seems to come to the rescue. And it's just getting more and more now, more pressure being put on Zelensky. I can't see there being peace this year. I just can't. I don't know how it feasibly can happen. There's so much whitewashing of Russian atrocities at the moment. Look at the Olympics. We haven't touched on that yet.
That's where we're at, actually. I have it right up on the screen.
One of the biggest stories this week was, the poor guy, his helmet, remembering all those. I just met Yaroslava Moguch, the high jumper. This Christmas, she came down. She was teaching.
I saw that picture. Yeah, right.
Athletics track. She was talking. I was saying, and I was working, and I did a piece about the amount of athletes that have been killed and training centers that have been destroyed in Ukraine. You all right? You got a bomb?
We got something going off. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we did a piece about that. How many community centers and athletics tracks and sports facilities that have been destroyed by the Russians? I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, but it's a lot. And the amount of athletes that have been killed because of Russia's invasion. It's horrendous that the IOC have made a political decision to allow Russians to compete in the first place, which means they've already made a political decision before you even.
Well, that was my article today. The juxtaposition I placed was that the decision, and I think appropriate decision, to ban Russia from competing, except for the unnamed country participants, which basically they get to compete, but they don't do it in the name of Russia, which is whatever. That's a political decision itself. So they made it a political decision, but there's nothing inherently political about showing other athletes that were killed. It didn't ask you to do anything other than recognize that they had been killed. And if you don't mind, do you mind I have the list of the names on those helmets? It's actually in my article.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it would be great, since they didn't want to do it, we'll do it here. So Evgen Malyushev, Dmitro Sharpar, Pablo Ischenko, Maxim Halichev, Andriy Kutsenko, Alexei Loganov, Karina Bukhtar, Kalina Bakur. Sorry, my bad. Kickboxer. Mikita Kuzubenko, Roman Polishchuk, Andriy Yeremenko, Taras Shpuk, Fedir Yepifanov, Karina Troyan, Volodymyr Andrushuk, Alexei Haborov, Daria Kurdel, Ivan Kononenko, Alina Pershudova, Katerina Dyashenko, Victoria Ivashko, Maria Lebed, and Nazar Zui. Those were the names of the people who were featured on his helmet.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, some of them were his friends and colleagues, and the whole Ukrainian team have to see those Russian athletes. Yes, they didn't pull the trigger. Maybe some of them have got nothing to do with the war. However, at the end of the day, the president's an ICC indicted war criminal who's invaded and done the most atrocious atrocities to Ukrainians, things we haven't seen since World War II. I was myself in a Nazi-style filtration camp in the east of Ukraine with civilians. A 19-year-old train driver was just rounded up and electrocuted, beaten and tortured in the black site with us, who had nothing to do with the military, just for being Ukrainian. So, the way they described it got my hackles up as being, we deal with 20 or 30 other conflicts as well, and it was as blatant as that. And, we can't make exceptions just for one. 1 million people have been killed just on one side. So, so casualties on one side. I mean, this isn't just a conflict, we have to just deal with it, can't make any rules. You've already made a political decision to allow the country to send its competitors, neutral or not. It's like.
And he filed an appeal, and today was announced not too far before we went on the air.
I haven't seen the outcome of that yet.
Yeah, they denied it. They turned it down. So he filed an appeal, and they denied the appeal. Yeah.
Really disgusting, to be honest. It's heartbreaking. It's good to see his colleagues in solidarity. I mean, once again, it's Ukraine teaching the world about integrity, which is a very foundations that Olympics is built on.
Yeah.
And, to remember your colleagues who died, and you're not making a statement, you're remembering friends. It's just, it's not like it had like the Italian, was it the Italian guy had Russian flag on the back of his helmet? It's like one rule for one, another rule. I mean, it's just bizarre. And that's where we are today, at the end of the week, is that you've got, a guy that could have been walking home with a medal now kicked out of the Olympics because he just wanted to remember his friends on his helmet who were killed in Ukraine. I mean, it's just it's upside down. It just annoys me. It really does annoy me. The decisions like that are just upside down and back to front. It's just, they've got it
Absolutely.
wrong. They could have easily managed it. They could have easily managed this at the start, and they didn't. They just let it go, and then they got some guy who just randomly spouted out some stuff in a press conference that just got even more people's hackles up. It's just bizarre the way they've handled it.
Well, brother, we did it. We got a week broadcast. We said 1 hour, but that's impossible. There's too much
It's
to say.
impossible. We're rubbish at that. We're rubbish. And we got some
right.
we got a great turnout. We got 100.
Yeah, look at this. We got wonderful
people.
friends here.
Thank you for
really
coming and watch.
appreciate you.
We'll do it again next week.
We will do this next week, and I will remind you, please follow Shaun's account, and please consider at least the $5 a month tab that's up there available. I know he's like I am. We're going to keep giving you information and putting it up there, but to make sure that this is what we can do instead of having to have some other task. I really like you becoming a journalist. I get excited when I see that you're writing materials, and I like the process because when I was at KPFT and we were volunteer-based news organization as well. I mean, the station was volunteer-driven, but our news team was driven by 4 core producer team. I was in the editor role mostly in that capacity for a while. Then I took over the production of my own show, Music Beyond Borders, and Noticiero, the Spanish language news. And I loved when new people came in and wanted to figure out how to do journalism on radio for their community needs because they had a read on the ground, and all we had to do was teach them sort of a protocol by which they can get things done. And this week we got validated by when it's bad journalism, it's over at FT with Christopher Miller and others like that. And I'll ding the Times as well because they repeated it as if it was a thing. But you saw.
I was just saying, FT did a great piece about the children that were kidnapped, and it's stuff like this week just ruined it.
Fair enough. Good point.
You know what I mean?
See, now you just turned into a great journalist in front of everyone by doing the exact same thing. You told the truth, even though I was going to bash them. So that's what a good journalist is.
I was fuming when I saw that too.
Absolutely. And I said this over the last few shows, and I said it last time. I'll say it one more time. Good information is like good nutrition. You are only as good as what you put into your mind, your body, and your soul. And if you feed it with junk because you're being filled, all right, that's what you're going to get in the end. Your nutritional value will be terrible. Empty starches, empty non-nutrients, and lack of hydrates when you're filling up your body. And now you don't have to deal with that if you take the time to find out what's really going on. So follow Shaun's account. You can, of course, follow the one I'm doing, and we will come back this time next week to do all again with who knows what happens between them.
It's crazy, isn't it? We won't we will have plenty to talk about.
We actually had to develop a method by which we're going to put these things together, and it'll get even better. And then tomorrow night I will be doing like right now it's 10:28. I'll start at about 10 o'clock doing the weekly culture show, and I will feature music from Taras Kompanichenko and my friend Alexander Honcharенko, who plays Lira, and a few other bits to really get you warmed up for something I plan on continuing to do all throughout 2026. And so thank you for joining tonight. And we will leave with some Taras Kompanichenko bringing us out into how this all works, like what really makes us happy.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraini, Героям слава. І пиздець Російської Федерації.
Thank you. Cheers.